Hello, this is Photography Gamer. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you to everyone who watched the previous episode on Ghost of Tsushima. In today's episode, I'm going to be looking at the photo mode in Days Gone, and I'll be breaking down the game's photo mode functionality. Following this, I'm going to delve into this episode's special topic, which is dynamic lighting and how to use it. And I'll wrap up the episode with some questions I've received from the virtual photography community. Okay, so Days Gone. Well, Days Gone, it was the first game I reviewed for the channel, so it's kind of nice to revisit it. Days Gone has an amazing photo mode, and I would say, as well as being a beautifully detailed game, it's also one of, if not the most comprehensive photo mode out there, with some incredibly detailed functions, and it's something probably more for professional photographers, because a lot of it you might not know what the hell they're talking about, but I'm going to do my best today to sort of demystify those things and bring kind of some sort of like a understanding to everything available to you. Okay, so first, the basic functions. You can use L2 and R2 for craning. Craning is like raising and lowering the camera as if it were on a crane. So, you raise it high, you get nice sort of aerial shots. You raise it low, you can get those kind of ground level photos. If you press the touchpad, you can reset the whole photo edit. So if you've done an edit and you're not interested and it's just not working for you, press the touchpad back to the beginning. The square button brings up the help menu. Now the help is useful if you just want to see what all the buttons do. Like L3, if you click L3, that will lock your focus. R3, if you click that moves the camera to the nearest character. Pressing triangle will hide your user interface for when you're ready to take the photo. And if you hold the circle button down, it can decrease the camera movement speed, which is good if you want micro adjustments. And it also is something you can use on the sliders, because the sliders don't work in like the smallest units. So if you want tiny incremental changes to anything, hold down circle. Okay, now we're into the main menu. So we've got the basic options. So there's basic and advanced here. So first I'm going to go through basic. So basic, we've got the camera, we've got three options for cameras. We've got tilt, brightness, contrast. Tilt is really a way of adjusting the angle. Now I use it really for motion or surrealness. So if there's action and motion in the shot, a little bit of tilting gives a nice effect to it. Or if you want to create an image that's a bit disturbed and surreal, put it at a weird tilted angle and it kind of distorts things and it makes things feel a bit strange. Then we've got brightness. Brightness is what you would imagine. It's good if you just want to... I use brightness and contrast together because contrast makes shadows darker and the lighter areas brighter. So it kind of like makes it more extreme. And sometimes you need to add a bit of brightness to balance that off. So those two things are things I use in conjunction quite often. Next we have lens. So field of view, it's really the framing. So it's like the millimeter of a camera lens. So think of it like a zoom in, zoom out without using the joysticks. Obviously with this, sometimes there is a slight curvature and the edges of the screen depending on where you're at and where the subjects are at. So just bear that in mind. It might distort some of the image, but I use it if you just want to crop in a little bit. Focal distance is like focus basically. So where do you want the point of focus to be? So if you were using a camera and you had the sort of focus ring and you press the shutter half down, it would focus on that space. That's really what focal distance is. Then you have aperture. Aperture is measured in f-stops. The lower the f-stop, the less of the image will be in focus. The higher the f-stop, the more will be in focus. So you've got f1.4 to f22. f22, if you do a shot with that, everything you can see will be in focus. If you use f1.4, it will be a very narrow, thin area. Next we have film grain. Now this is one of the better film grain features in any games. Like you can go from 0 to 100%. If you go right up to 100, it looks a bit over the top, but I find about like 25 to 30% gives a nice kind of griminess to the image, a bit of character. Very good grain effect. Next we have characters. So you've got Deacon visibility, Deacon's bike visibility, other characters visibility, and facial expression. So obviously some shots you might want to take Deacon out if you just want to do a landscape. You might want to take his bike out if it's just in the background and distracting, and then there might be other characters who are annoying in the shot. So that's just really up to your own preference. The facial expressions in this are pretty good, I'd say. Like some are a bit ridiculous. It depends if you want a bit of humour. They're really like humorous. There's a couple where it looks angry, which are good for like combat sort of scenarios, but generally they're quite nice options you've got there. And finally on the basic, you've got frames and presets. Now frames, they're just kind of like nice things you can put around the image. I don't use them myself personally, but they're kind of like pop art, fun stuff. Then you can add logos and you can change the color. So you can add a Days Gone logo in white or black, and you can move them around to various different positions on the screen if you want to create a kind of like a poster type image. Then you have presets. You can also make custom presets. So if you've set up a photo and you've done all the editing and you like the settings, you can save that preset so you don't have to keep doing that over and over. That's a really nice function. But the standard presets, basically they're filters. They should really be called filters because that's really what they are. But they don't act like filters. They don't have a 0 to 100%. Basically, they preset editing all across the advanced and basic functions. So you can go back into it and it'll tweak it. But there's some really nice filters in it. There's one I like, what's it called? Vintage or something? It's kind of very muted and brown and it just really fits the game style. But yeah, the presets are very nice. Okay, so that's the basic functions. So most people will be happy with those. But if you think you're hot shit and you want to get into like advanced photo editing, press the X button and you will go into the advanced menus where you've got 3 distinct sections and they're very comprehensive. So I'm going to go into each of them now. First, you have color grading. So this is more like a Photoshop scenario. This is more like what pros would be doing with real life photos. So you've got temperature. Temperature is something that when you take a picture in real life, the camera, if you haven't told it what the temperature is in terms of visuals, it will automatically guess. It's really a case of like white balancing. So the higher you go, the warmer, the lower, the colder. So warm is good if you want to create that kind of like glowing images, and then the blue is good for like a nighttime vibe. Then you've got tinting. Tinting, one end is green, one end is purple. I don't use this much. This is just like micro adjustments. If you want to change the color scheme from a green to a purple, like you just go little way up and down, it can help the image. Then you've got brightness again. So that acts the same as the brightness that we already talked about. So, you can go bright, you can go dark. It's good for like micro adjustments. Then we do have contrast, but the contrast here is split into red, green and blue. And you can move those 3 sliders up and down in different ways to merge and blend the contrast. So if you move them all together, it would just be like moving the basic function contrast slider, or if you move them down. But if you start moving 1 or 2, then you're dealing with contrast, but you're altering the color as well of the contrast. So that's something to play around with. Then we have saturation. Saturation is basically color. So you bump that up, everything in the image is going to become more vibrantly colorful. Lower it, it's going to go black and white if you go to 0. Then you have vibrancy. Now vibrancy affects color without affecting skin tones. So if you have Deacon in the shot and you have trees in the background and you want to make the trees more green and lush, put the vibrancy right up and Deacon's skin will stay the way it was, but the other things will go much more colorful. It's kind of tricky, depends on the situation, but it's a nice feature to have. Then we have gamma. Now gamma are midtones, so it's not the highlights, it's not the shadowy areas, it's this kind of mid region of the image. So again, you've got red, green, blue, sliders that go up, sliders that go down. So again, this is really micro adjustment of coloring. Then you have gain. Gain deals with highlights, so the brighter areas. Again, red, green and blue. And you just play around with that if you want to make the sky bluer, or you want to, little things like that. Then we have offset, again red, green, blue. Now this deals with midtones, highlights and shadows simultaneously. So it's quite severe when you use offset, so bear that in mind. It's not something you should really be broadly using. The others are more like better, I'd say. This is good if you just want to make it a bit brighter, a bit darker, but it's very extreme. And finally on this one you've got vignettes and vignette fall off. So the vignette is a sort of a border on the image, like a sort of a circular area in the middle of the image should be clear, and then it will gradually get darker as you go to the edge of the framing. And the percentage you have it and the fall off will dictate how severe and how dark the vignette will be. Vignette's basically aim is to sort of focus your eye on the center of the image. Okay, next we have depth color grading. So this really, it's to do with the near and the far area of the image. So if there are things in the foreground you would like to make more colorful or have a different tint or have a different gamma effect, you can change that. And also, if there's things in the distance, you can do the same. So you've got near tint with red, green and blue, which changes the tint at the front of the transition depth. Then you've got near saturation, which is the saturation of the front transition. And then you've got near gamma, which is the gamma of the front transition, which is more, and gamma's very pop art effects. And you've got all of those things again for far tint, far saturation, far gamma. So then really it's about transition depth and spread. The depth is the distance between the near and the far, and the spread is the fall off between the near and the far. So really what you're doing is, with near and far, you're creating two different color grading schemes. So think of it like two different colors, and with the depth and the spread of the transition, you can dictate, is it like a complete 50% split, or is there a sort of a soft fade off between the two so it's nicely merged? Now this is not something I use that often, but it's nice if you want to make the background more vibrant, or if you want the character to stand out and you want the background like almost black and white. Depth color grading, it's an advanced feature and it's something you don't necessarily need to use, but it's nice to have the option, and this is a very, very smooth system. Finally, on advanced features, we have bloom. Now, bloom, I don't really use it much, but what it does, it creates a kind of an area in the image where you can dictate where it is and how large it is. So you can choose a color of blooming around the image. So it's kind of like a glowing type effect of with a color. So you can choose the intensity, you can do the threshold, which is basically when it occurs. You can clamp the maximum intensity to a certain peak. Then with the X and the Y axis, you can choose the size. And then finally, with the color, you can do the red, green and blue sliders to dictate what the color of the bloom will be. And you have two bloom effects here if you want to do them, so you can mix two together. So it gives you possibilities for some really interesting combinations. It's good for post-production color alterations effects, but again, I don't use it that much. But if you want to add something to the image, like if you've done an image and you've done all you can, but you want to add something else, try bloom. It's a bit hit and miss. I'm not a big fan of it, but it's a very nice feature to include. Okay, so that's the Days Gone photo mode. It's quite a comprehensive one, so that was a lot to get through, but it's without doubt the best. It's the most comprehensive and professional one out there, but I'd say it's something aimed at more photography professionals, because there's so many functions that I've just gone through that most people will probably thinking, what the hell? It's advanced stuff, so maybe start with the basic things and then try and experiment some of the advanced stuff. You don't need to use them all. I don't use them all. On the advanced, I use the first screen mainly, unless I want to tweak a few far and near tints. So you just use what you need. It's not a perfect photo mode. Like for me, things it lacks, when you move the camera, if Deacon or the character you're controlling is standing near an object, they often get stuck. The camera can get stuck, that's annoying. Also, the distance you can move the camera away from the subject is quite limited, and I would say the font size in those menus could be more bold, because it's quite faint and thin. I think it needs to be a little bit more bolder so that people can see it clearer. It's a little bit faint. But barring those little things, it's a bloody good mode. I give it 9.9 out of 10 for the photo mode. It's just those little negatives that just stop it being perfect, but it's without doubt the best photo mode out there. Okay, so that's the photo mode for Days Gone. Now the special topic is dynamic lighting and how to use it. So what is dynamic lighting? Well, dynamic lighting, generally I would say it's like directional lighting, because what happens with light is if you point a light in a direction, you light something, but also by lighting something you create shadows. So one side is light, one side is dark. And that is it's very much like a film noir or cinematography type way of lighting. So it has a very atmospheric effect. They use it a lot in film, a lot in cinema, and you can use it in games if you've got strong light sources. So you can use the sunlight, for example, when games allow you to change the position of the sun. Think of that like dynamic lighting. Or in Days Gone, you can use the bike. So you can't take pictures of Deacon with the bike, but if you want to take pictures of the freakers or the environment or characters, you can use the side light on the bike, position yourself to the side of the subject, go into photo mode, position it, and then you'll see one side of the face of that character is really bright, the other is dark. And once you play with the contrast and the levels, you create a really interesting kind of depth of shadow, much like in film noir, as I said. So if you want to create moody images, dynamic lighting is fantastic for that. It really makes the image pop out. And I mean, general tips for lighting, you can put lighting at the front, side, quarter angles, or the back. And all of those things have different effects. So like if you've got a game where you can move the sun, try that. Move it around the subject all the way around and you'll see different effects, how the light affects it and how the shadow appears. And shadows really, they're very important in photography for me because they really create depth, they create atmosphere, they create something that's just really, it adds a layer of interest to the image that you don't have otherwise. So for me, dynamic lighting is very important for creating real punchy, powerful, atmospheric, cinematic images. There's a couple of examples I've got on the screen and I'll show some over the next few minutes with the question and answers. But you try it with the bike, try light the freakers, light other characters in the camps. You'll be amazed, like it's like a big flashbulb effect. That's really like what professional photographers do in a photo shoot. If you want to create a really atmospheric photo shoot, you put one light to the side of the subject and then boom, the flash goes off. One side of the face is bright, one's dark. Immediately, you've got thick, rich atmosphere. So give that a whirl, see how you get on. Okay, we're nearly done. It's quite a long episode because the Days Gone mode's pretty epic. So I'm only going to do 3 questions today. So the first question is, I never seem to know when to stop processing my photos. How do you know when a photo is finished? Well, that is a good question. You don't really know. Like you can keep editing a photo for 100 years and never be finished because you'll always keep playing around with it, tweaking this, tweaking that. For me, I take the picture, I frame it, I compose it, I deal contrast, brightness, color, saturation, vignetting, filters, blah, 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 focal depth. Once all those things are done, I'm really just looking at it thinking, does the framing work? If the framing works, that's finished. And then it's really the color balance, because color balance is one of the most important things in an image. When you look at an image, you want it to just sit there. You want to look at it as one thing. You don't want to say, oh, that bit's bright, that bit's dark, or this bit stands out. You want to see the image as one thing to consume. And color, I think color balancing, color grading is a really important part. That's why Days Gone is also a very interesting game, because it gives you all those color grading options. So, and for everyone, I would just say, look at the picture. If you look at it and you think that's good, I'm happy with that, it's done. Let it go, because you can keep going and you can ruin images. So just know when to walk away. Okay, question 2. I'm new to virtual photography and I'm not sure how to use color grading or filters correctly. Can you help? Well, as I just said, every image is different. That's how I would say. Like when you take a picture, you can't apply the same principles to every photograph, because depending on whether it's a person, a place, an object, a scene, landscape, whatever, you've got to take each individual shot as a unique piece of creating. So you have to look at it and say, what color would work? Is it too bright? Should I strip some color out? Add this filter? Look through the filters. That's a good tip. Like on Days Gone, for example, go to the presets before you do anything and just look at the presets. Which one of those presets works the best with the image you've just framed? That's a good thing to sort of starting point. And then why does it fit? You know, you can start to work out, and then after you've done it a while, you just start to know, like this one would be good in black and white, this one would be good really colorful, this one would be good as a kind of a split tone. It's practice, 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 bit more practice, practice again. Trial and error, but you know, you can tell the images that work in terms of color grading or like filters, because it just feels better, but that's something that will come in time. Okay, final question. From a professional perspective, what's the most annoying thing about virtual photo modes? I think for me, I don't find them annoying. The only thing annoys me are when you can't pull the camera out very far into the distance. Like Mad Max is a great game for that, because you can really zoom out miles, it seems. It gives you a lot of freedom to compose in any kind of image. So it's nice. I don't like the games where they really restrict the distance you can pull away. And also getting stuck behind objects, or if you're in a room, for example, and there's a window and you want to take a picture through the window, some games won't let you move the camera out of the room. Things like that. Collision detection in the environment, very annoying, because you don't really have to deal with that in real life. they're the only things. Like most of the modes are pretty easy to use. I just think maybe some sort of uniform system where every photo mode has the same functionality in terms of the buttons would help, because it can be quite frustrating when you go from one game to the other and they're all very different. Okay, that's all the questions. Right, well, that was a bit of an epic episode, so thank you for watching, and that was Days Gone. Very good photo mode, the best in my opinion. Really good game also. If you haven't played it, I would definitely recommend playing it. Recommend the photo mode. Very good game. Dynamic lighting, have a go with bikes, have a go with dynamic sunlight. If you want a second opinion on images, tweet me, details will be on the screen. Also, if you've got any questions you want to ask me, just head over to my Twitter and I'll answer them in the next video. I don't know what the next one will be. Maybe Red Dead 2, because I haven't done that yet. But yeah, that's it. So I hope that was useful. Go and get Days Gone, have a go at the photo mode. It is really, really good. This is Photography Gamer signing off. Enjoy your day and thank you for watching. Cheers.